The world had shifted the moment my son Derek married Emily. It wasn't that I disliked her, I never thought I did. I wanted what was best for my son, and if Emily made him happy, then that's all I could ask for. They'd been together for a few years before they got married. And though I didn't fully understand everything about her, she seemed sweet enough in the beginning. I didn't want to interfere. After all, she was the one Derek had chosen. I raised Derek to be independent, kind, and respectful, the way I had tried to raise my daughters before him. He was always my little boy, though. Even as an adult, he still had a place in my heart I could never quite let go of. But it seemed like Emily didn't like that. I could tell from the beginning she wasn't too fond of me. There were little things, the subtle hints, the way she'd smile at me and yet never quite look me in the eye. When I visited, she'd always be busy in the kitchen or doing something that kept her away from me. It wasn't overt, but it was there, that tension between us. And still, I tried to be patient. I never pushed Derek away from her. I didn't want to be the overbearing mother-in-law who made her son choose between his wife and his family. So, I stayed quiet, smiled, and let things play out. But that all changed a month ago. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. I had gone over to their house, as I often did, to bring over some homemade cookies and visit with Derek. He'd called earlier in the day, asking if I could stop by, so I figured everything was normal. It had been a while since I'd had one-on-one time with him, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity. When I arrived, Emily was already in the kitchen. I smiled at her as I walked in, setting the cookies down on the counter. "Hi, Emily. How are you today?" She didn't look up at me right away. Her focus was entirely on whatever was cooking in the pot in front of her. There was something about the way she did that, like she couldn't even take the time to acknowledge me properly. But again, I didn't push it. I went to sit at the kitchen table, waiting for her to join the conversation. It wasn't long before Derek came in, looking a bit frazzled. "Mom, I'm glad you're here. I wanted to talk to you about something." I looked at him, concern immediately taking hold. "What's wrong, Derek?" He sat down beside me, his hands clasped together on the table. "It's about Emily's family. I think we need to talk about how we're all going to handle things when her parents come into town next month." Now, I didn't think much of it at first. It made sense. Families need to figure out how to navigate these types of situations, especially when two families with different traditions come together. But as Derek explained the situation further, I could feel my stomach tightening. Emily's family had a tendency to be, well, they weren't the most gracious. They didn't exactly treat Derek like part of the family. To be honest, I'd never been a fan of them either. But I kept quiet. "I just think it's important that we're all on the same page," Derek said, clearly uneasy. "I know they're difficult, and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable, Mom, but it's a big deal." His words felt genuine, but there was an underlying tension I couldn't ignore. Emily didn't seem interested in having this conversation. She just continued stirring whatever was in that pot, her back turned to us. "Are you okay with that, Emily?" I asked, trying to gauge where her mind was at. She turned to look at me, her face emotionless. "I'm fine," she replied, then went back to cooking. I nodded slowly, but something in the air felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was intruding, that maybe Emily didn't want me here, didn't want to have this conversation in front of me, didn't want to deal with me at all. And that feeling of being unwanted, of being an outsider in my own son's life, was a feeling that had been growing stronger every time I visited Dot later that afternoon. As I was about to leave, the real problem began to surface. I grabbed my purse and stood up from the table, saying my goodbyes to Derek. He walked me to the door, his hand on my back. "Thanks for stopping by. Mom, we'll talk more about the plans later, okay?" he said, a soft smile on his face, but there was something in his eyes on uncertainty, a hesitation that I hadn't noticed before. I looked at Emily, who was standing at the kitchen counter, her arms crossed. She didn't say anything as I walked past her, but then she spoke up. Her voice was quiet, but sharp, like a knife hidden in velvet. "Just so you know," she said, her eyes narrowing, "I'm not always going to put up with your constant interference. You might want to remember that." I froze in my tracks, my hand on the door handle. I turned back to face her, my heart pounding in my chest. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice trembling. She stood there, her face unreadable. "You heard me. You're always meddling, always trying to be in the middle of everything. I'm not going to let you do that anymore. You're just an old pig trying to control everything." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Old pig. I had to swallow hard to keep my composure. What in the world had I done to deserve that? I had spent so many years trying to be kind to her, trying to accept her as part of the family, and this is how she repaid me. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. What could I say to that? How could I even begin to process the raw hate in her voice? Derek appeared at my side, his face pale. "Emily, that's enough," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "Mom didn't do anything to deserve that." But Emily wasn't listening. She wasn't looking at me either. She was staring out the window, her arms still crossed, as though I didn't even matter. I couldn't stand there any longer. The hurt, the betrayal, it was too much. Without saying another word, I left the house. As I walked to my car, I could feel the sting of her words echoing in my mind. Old pig. The drive home was a blur. I kept telling myself it wasn't worth it, that she didn't deserve my time or my attention. But every time I thought about what she'd said, I couldn't help but feel a deep sadness. The woman I had tried so hard to welcome into my family had just called me something horrible. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I hadn't even been angry at first, just shocked, like I'd been hit in the stomach with a sledgehammer. It wasn't just the insult that hurt, it was the feeling of being completely rejected. How could she say something like that? She was supposed to be a part of the family, but there was no time to dwell on her words. I knew I had to talk to Derek, had to figure out where this was coming from. It wasn't until the next morning that I called him. I waited until I thought he would be up after all. He worked long hours at the office, and I didn't want to catch him off guard. The phone rang 3 times before he answered. "Mom." Derek's voice was tired but warm. "Hey, what's up?" "Derek," I began, trying to keep my tone steady. "I need to talk to you about yesterday, about what happened with Emily." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then he sighed. "Look, Mom, I'm really sorry about that. Emily, she gets upset sometimes, and you know how she is. She just says things like old pig." Derek. I could feel the heat rising in my chest again. What does that even mean? Why would she say something like that? He was quiet for a moment, then muttered something under his breath. "I don't know. She's been stressed lately, okay? We've both been stressed. With the house and work, things haven't been easy. But I didn't mean for it to come out like that. I'll talk to her." I didn't know whether to believe him. Sure, there had been a few times when Emily had been stressed out or snapped over trivial things, but nothing like this. This was different. And this wasn't just some casual comment. It was a deliberate insult aimed directly at me. I wasn't a fool. I knew when someone meant to hurt me. "I just don't understand." "Derek," I said, my voice breaking. "I've tried so hard to be kind to her, to accept her into the family. I've always tried to make her feel welcome. I don't know why she feels this way about me." Derek was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight. "Mom, I need you to understand something. Emily and I have had some issues lately, and it's not just you. She's been different. I think she's feeling the pressure of everything: our marriage, my job, the house, and when she gets overwhelmed, she lashes out. It's not right, and I'll talk to her about it, I promise." I wasn't convinced. Lashes out. Derek, she doesn't just lash out. She called me an old pig. She insulted me to my face. And it's not just about this one thing. It's everything. The way she ignores me, the way she avoids spending time with me, the way she talks down to me like I don't matter. What happened to the Emily I used to know? There was another long silence before Derek spoke again. His voice was low, as if he were weighing his words carefully. "I don't know, Mom, but she's not the same as she was before. And it's not just you. She feels like I'm choosing you over her, like I'm too close to my family. She's told me that before, in her own way. But it's hard for me to. I'm stuck in the middle. Stuck in the middle." That was the problem, wasn't it? Derek had always been close to me, but I never expected that closeness to become an issue in his marriage. I didn't want to be the cause of any tension between them, but it was hard to ignore the truth. Emily was driving a wedge between us, and Derek didn't know how to handle it. "What do you mean by, she feels like I'm choosing you over her?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "Are you saying that I'm the problem here? That I'm the one who's causing tension between you two?" "No, Mom," Derek quickly replied. "I didn't mean it like that. It's just that Emily feels like I'm too dependent on you, like I'm always running to you for help or advice. It's been building for a while now. She doesn't want to feel like she's always second to you." I felt my stomach twist. So, this was about me being a mother. Emily resented the fact that Derek and I had abandoned a bond that I thought was perfectly normal. But now, I was starting to see things differently. It wasn't just Emily's attitude toward me that was the problem. It was her jealousy, her insecurity. She wanted Derek all to herself, and if that meant pushing me out of the picture, she would. I tried to keep my voice calm. I never meant to come between you and Emily, Derek. I love both of you, but you need to understand that what she said to me, what she called Mitts, not just something I can forget. It's hurtful. I know, Mom, and I'm sorry. I'll talk to her. I'll make sure she knows how wrong that was. Derek's voice faltered, as if he were unsure whether his words would make a difference. I paused for a moment, letting the silence hang between us. I don't know, Derek. I want to believe you, but at the same time, I can't keep letting her treat me like this. I'm your mother, and I deserve respect. I've been a part of your life for a long time. I've always supported you, and now, it feels like I'm losing you. There was a shift in his tone then, a softening, as if he realized the gravity of what he had said. You're not losing me, Mom, but I need you to understand that I'm married now. I can't just pick sides. I felt a pang of guilt twist in my chest. I didn't want to make him feel like he had to choose between me and Emily. But it was becoming harder to swallow the way things were unfolding. I didn't ask for this rift between us, but I couldn't deny that it was there. And now, it seemed like it was growing by the day. I just want things to be better, Derek, I said softly. I don't want to fight with her. I don't want to be the one that causes problems between you two. But I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. I know, Mom, he replied, his voice low and tired. I'll talk to her. We'll figure it out. I didn't feel any better. I wanted to believe that things would change, that Emily would apologize, that the tension between us would ease, but deep down, I knew that it wasn't just about one conversation. This was something much deeper than a passing argument. It was a battle for control, a fight for space in Derek's life. I didn't know what I had expected after my conversation with Derek, but I certainly didn't expect things to get worse. After he promised me he would talk to Emily, I thought that maybe, just maybe, things would settle down, that the tension between us would fade away like dust in the wind. But it didn't. It only grew thicker, more suffocating. Emily's coldness toward me had escalated to something far more passive, and Derek, as much as he tried, couldn't seem to change a thing. The next time I visited their home, I arrived with a sense of dread, a knot tightening in my stomach. I had told myself I wouldn't go over there for a while, after the way Emily treated me. But Derek had called earlier in the week, asking if I could help with some things around the house. It wasn't unusual for me to lend a hand here and there, especially since Derek worked long hours and Emily was always, well, distant. I had prepared myself to go in, be polite, help, and leave without any drama. But as soon as I stepped through the door, I knew that the peaceful resolution I had hoped for was nowhere in sight. The air was thick with tension, more so than ever before. Emily was in the living room, as usual, with her back turned, staring at the TV. It was almost as if she was purposely ignoring me. Not that I was surprised, but it still stung. Double quotes. Hi, Emily, I called out, trying to sound cheerful. As I entered the room, I set my purse down on the side table and walked over to her. How have you been? Her eyes flicked toward me briefly, but she didn't answer right away. When she did, it was as if she couldn't be bothered to offer any warmth. Fine, she said, barely glancing at me. Her tone was curt, clipped. Busy. I tried not to let her coldness affect me, but it was hard. I was here, doing my best, and she couldn't even give me a proper greeting. I forced a smile. Good to hear, Derek said. You've been working hard on some things around the house. Need help with anything? Emily gave me a short nod but didn't say anything else. The silence between us was suffocating, the kind of silence that felt like it stretched on for far too long, heavy with unspoken words. But I wasn't about to let her push me away completely. I brought some soup, I said, trying to ease the tension. It's your favorite. I thought it might be nice for lunch. She finally looked at me, her eyes narrowing just slightly. You didn't need to do that, she said, her voice almost dismissive. But thanks, I guess. I was taken aback by how little she cared. What had happened to the woman who had once smiled and thanked me for everything? Now, it seemed like everything I did was an inconvenience to her. I sighed, inwardly, and decided not to let her attitude ruin the visit. I'll just put it in the kitchen, I said, trying to sound unaffected as I walked toward the kitchen. It wasn't like I hadn't been in this house before. I knew the layout, and I knew what I had to do. As I entered the kitchen, I noticed the clutter on the counter, dirty dishes, unopened mail, half-empty coffee cups. Normally, Emily kept the place tidy, but now it looked like a mess. It was unusual, and I couldn't help but feel like it reflected the state of things between us, unkept, unresolved, and disorganized. I started getting the soup ready, trying to keep my mind occupied. But all I could think about was how things had gone so wrong between us. This wasn't just a simple case of a jealous daughter-in-law. There was more to it, something I hadn't figured out yet. Just then, I heard footsteps approaching from behind. I turned to see Derek standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He wasn't smiling like he usually did. Something was off. "Hey Mom," he said softly. "How's it going?" I forced a smile, even though I didn't feel like it. "I'm good, Derek, just heating up some soup. You hungry?" "Yeah, I'll eat in a minute," he said, stepping into the kitchen and leaning against the counter. There was an awkward pause between us, neither of us sure of what to say next. Finally, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Derek, what's going on? You said you'd talk to Emily. I thought things would be better by now." His gaze flickered to the floor, then back to me. There was hesitation in his eyes, as though he were struggling with something. "Mom, I've talked to her, but... He paused, as though gathering his thoughts. "But it's not that simple." "What do you mean?" I asked, trying not to sound impatient. "She called me an old pig, Derek. How is that not simple? You told me you'd handle this." "I know, Mom, and I'm sorry, but I think there's more going on here than just what you and I can see." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a sadness I couldn't place. "It's not just about you. It's about everything, the pressure she's been under, her own insecurities, and, well, some things from her past." "What are you talking about?" I asked, completely thrown off. "Her past." Derek hesitated for a long moment, then sighed deeply. "Look, she's not what she seems, okay? There are things she hasn't told me, things about her childhood, her family, and I think that's why she's acting like this. She's not used to, well, two people being close to her, especially women. She's always felt like she had to compete with others for attention, and I think she's transferring that onto you." I stared at him, shocked. "So, you're saying she's been like this because of her past? Because of her issues?" "I'm not saying it's an excuse for how she's treated you," Derek quickly added, "but it's part of the picture. She's been through a lot, Mom, and it's hard for her to open up. I think you might be the closest thing to a mother figure she's ever had, and it scares her. That's why she's pushing you away." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All this time, I had thought Emily simply didn't like me. But now it seemed like there was more to her coldness than I had ever imagined. She wasn't just being rude or spiteful. She was terrified. Terrified of getting close. Terrified of trusting someone enough to let them in. I shook my head, still processing everything. "Derek, I don't know what to say. I can't keep walking on eggshells around her. I've tried so hard to be patient, to accept her, to love her like family. But this is too much." Derek walked over to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I know, Mom. I know. But you've got to understand, she's been hurt. She's afraid, and sometimes when people are afraid, they lash out." I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to understand Emily the way he did. But right now, all I could feel was the sting of her words, the weight of her rejection. "Then what do I do, Derek?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What do I do now?" "You keep being yourself, Mom," Derek said softly. "You keep showing her love. It'll take time, but you can't give up on her. Not now." I looked at him, unsure. How could I keep giving her love when she kept pushing me away? But Derek was right about one thing. If there was any chance for this to work, it had to come from me. And maybe, just maybe, if I showed Emily patience, if I let her see that I wasn't going anywhere, she might finally start to let me in. The days after my conversation with Derek felt like a slow burn. I tried, for his sake, to hold on to the hope that things would improve with Emily. Derek had assured me that she was just struggling with her past, that it wasn't about me, but my heart still ached from the distance she kept putting between us. She still didn't acknowledge me at family gatherings, still wouldn't talk to me outside of forced pleasantries. It felt like I was invisible, a nonentity in my own son's life. But the real turning point came a few weeks later, at a family dinner. Derek had insisted that we all come together, that it was time to move past the awkwardness. He wanted things to be normal again, just like they used to be. So, despite my reservations, I agreed to come. I had spent years hosting these dinners, preparing meals, making everyone feel welcome. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time things would be different. When I arrived at Derek and Emily's house that evening, there was a certain energy in the air that I couldn't quite place. It was heavy, charged, like a storm was coming. Derek was busy in the kitchen, cooking the meal, and Emily was sitting at the table, staring at her phone. She barely looked up when I walked in, and I couldn't help but feel the familiar pang of rejection. "Hi, Emily," I said, my voice tentative but trying to sound warm. "I brought some salad. Hope you don't mind." She looked up, her expression flat. "Thanks," she muttered, barely acknowledging the gesture. Derek appeared shortly after, wiping his hands on a towel. "Mom, you're here. Great. Just in time. Dinner will be ready in a minute." I smiled at him, grateful for the warmth he was still showing me. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I set the salad on the table, trying not to let Emily's coldness get to me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The dinner passed in a tense silence. Emily barely touched her food, instead choosing to scroll through her phone. Derek tried to make conversation, but it was clear he was walking on eggshells, trying to keep things from escalating. I caught a few fleeting glances between them, the kind that spoke volumes, Emily's eyes narrowing when Derek said something too close to my direction, the way she would stiffen whenever I tried to speak. Finally, as the meal began to wind down, Derek made the mistake of bringing up a topic that had been simmering for a while, the possibility of expanding the family. He had been talking about this for some time, always asking if Emily and I had ever considered, getting along better for the sake of the grandchildren. As much as I wanted to believe it was a genuine attempt to mend the rift, I couldn't ignore the feeling that Derek was putting a lot of pressure on Emily, pushing her toward something she wasn't ready for. "I think it would be nice if we all got along, Derek said, breaking the silence as he put his fork down. "Mom's been trying really hard, Emily. Maybe it's time to let go of the past and ... Before he could finish, Emily slammed her hands down on the table, her face flushed with anger. "You don't get it, Derek. I've tried to be nice to her, but she's always hovering, always trying to make me feel like I'm not good enough. What do you want me to do? Pretend everything is fine when it's not?" Her outburst took us both by surprise. Derek looked stunned, his mouth slightly open as he processed what she had just said. For a moment, there was a charged silence, the kind that made the room feel unbearably small. "I'm not hovering, Emily," I said, keeping my voice steady. Though my heart was pounding, "I've only ever tried to help, to be supportive. But you make it seem like I'm some sort of enemy. I'm not trying to take Derek away from you. I'm not trying to make you feel like you're not good enough. But I won't keep pretending that this is okay. I won't keep being shut out like this." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You just don't understand, do you?" she said, her voice rising. "It's not about you, it's about me. I'm not perfect, okay? I'm not the person you want me to be, and I don't think I ever will be. So stop acting like I owe you anything. Just stop." My breath caught in my throat. That was it, the words I had been dreading to hear. Emily wasn't just rejecting me. She was rejecting everything about who I was and what I represented in Derek's life. She wasn't just angry. She was scared. Scared that she couldn't live up to some ideal she thought I had for her. Scared that she wasn't good enough, and that fear, that insecurity, was manifesting as hostility. "I never asked you to be perfect, Emily," I said quietly, my voice trembling slightly with emotion. "I just wanted you to be yourself. I've always accepted you for who you are, but I can't keep pretending like this is fine. I can't keep pretending like you don't have issues with me, because you do." Derek stood up then, walking over to Emily and putting his hand on her arm. "Emily, please, calm down," he urged, his voice low and pleading. "This isn't helping. We can talk about this." But Emily pulled away from him, shaking her head. "No, Derek, I've had enough. I don't need this. I don't need you trying to fix me, and I don't need her." She pointed at me. "I don't need her coming into my life and pretending like we can just skip over everything that's happened." Her words were sharp, bitter, and for the first time, I could see the cracks in the facade she had been so carefully maintaining. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about something deeper, something that had been eating away at her for a long time. I stood up, the weight of it all crashing down on me. I knew I had to make a choice, then. To back off and let her keep pushing me away, or to stand my ground and show her that I wasn't going anywhere, that I wasn't going to let her destroy our relationship without a fight. "I'm sorry for whatever I've done to make you feel this way, Emily," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "But I won't apologize for loving my son. I won't apologize for caring about you and trying to make this work. And if you can't see that, then maybe it's time for you to stop pretending you care." For a moment, the room was silent. Derek looked between us, his face full of conflict. I could see the pain in his eyes, the realization that no matter what he did, nothing would fix this rift between us. The love he had for both of us, the loyalty he felt toward both of us, was caught in the middle of a war neither of us were willing to back down from. Emily didn't say anything. She just stood there, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. And in that silence, I knew that something had changed. This wasn't just about my relationship with Emily anymore. This was about the three of us. About a fracture that had grown too large to ignore. And just as I thought the conversation had reached its peak, Emily spoke one last time, her voice low, her words barely above a whisper. "You don't know anything about me, do you?" she asked, her eyes dark with something deeper than anger, something that felt like regret. "You don't know what it's like to be me." The silence that followed Emily's cryptic words was deafening. I stood there, staring at her, trying to make sense of what she had just said. "You don't know anything about me, do you?" The words played over and over in my mind, but no matter how hard I tried to interpret them, nothing made sense. What was she hiding? And why, after all this time, was she suddenly revealing such a raw, vulnerable part of herself? Derek, still standing beside Emily, looked torn between the two of us. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to fix what had been broken. I could see the weight of this conversation pressing down on him, and I hated that I was the one putting him in the middle of it. But I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't ignore the hurt and the confusion that had been building up over the last few months. Emily's eyes flickered toward the floor, her arms still crossed tightly across her chest. I knew she was holding something back, and it made me feel even more like an outsider in her life. It was as if she had built this wall around herself, and no matter how many times I tried to climb it, I kept hitting a dead end. "Emily," I said softly, my voice a mixture of concern and frustration, "I'm not trying to hurt you, but I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. If there's something you need to tell me, something that's been bothering you all this time, then I'm here. I'm your mother-in-law, but I'm also here for you." She didn't respond right away. In fact, she didn't respond at all. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock on the wall, a steady rhythm that seemed to mock the tension that had settled between us. Finally, Derek spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emily, maybe it's time to tell her. You've been holding on to this for so long, and it's tearing you apart. Mom deserves to know." I could see the vulnerability in Derek's eyes, the deep concern for his wife that mirrored the concern I felt for him. He didn't want to see either of us suffer, but in the end, the only way forward was to face whatever had been buried for so long. And maybe, just maybe, this conversation was the key to breaking the cycle of bitterness that had defined their marriage. Emily's gaze shifted to Derek, then to me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something that resembled regret in her eyes. She exhaled slowly, as though she had been holding her breath for a long time. And then finally she spoke. "You're right," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been holding on to this for so long, and I've never told anyone. Not Derek, not anyone. I've kept it all locked inside because I didn't know how to say it." I took a step closer to her, trying to soften the space between us. "You don't have to explain anything if you're not ready, but if you want to, I'm here to listen." Emily glanced down at her hands, which were nervously twisting in her lap. She was struggling, I could tell. It wasn't easy for her to let this out, whatever it was, but this was the moment. There was no going back. This was the time to finally confront whatever had been eating away at her. "I grew up in a pretty messed up family," she said quietly, her voice cracking slightly as the words began to spill out. "My parents, they weren't exactly loving. My mom was cold, distant, and my dad, he was never there. He was always working, always too busy to pay attention to me. I felt invisible in my own home, and because of that, I learned to be independent. I learned to take care of myself, to rely on no one. I had to because no one else would." I could feel my heart breaking as she spoke, her words revealing a past I never could have imagined. I had always thought of Emily as distant, but I had never once considered that there might be real pain beneath that cold exterior. Her vulnerability was raw, a side of her I hadn't seen until now. "I thought I could handle everything on my own," she continued, her voice growing quieter. "But then I met Derek, and for the first time, I felt like someone actually cared about me, like I wasn't invisible anymore. But it scared me. It scared me so much because I didn't know how to deal with that kind of love. I didn't know how to let anyone in without feeling like I would be betrayed, like I would be abandoned." I could feel the air in the room shift, as if a weight had been lifted. And for the first time, I saw Emily in a different light. She wasn't just the cold, distant woman I had been trying to get along with. She was someone who had been hurt, someone who had built walls around herself to protect herself from the pain of abandonment. I pushed you away because I was scared, she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. I pushed you away because I didn't know how to accept your kindness. I didn't know how to let anyone love me without feeling like I'd be hurt. And now I feel like I've messed everything up. I don't know how to fix it. Her confession hit me harder than I ever could have anticipated. I had spent so much time resenting her for the way she treated me, for the way she ignored me, for the way she made me feel like I didn't belong in her life. But I had never once stopped to consider the reasons behind her actions. I had never understood that it wasn't about me at all. It was about her, about the wounds she carried from her past, wounds that I had never seen until now. I walked over to her slowly, my heart heavy with compassion. Emily, I said gently, I didn't know. I had no idea you were carrying all of this inside. But I want you to know that you don't have to do it alone. You're not invisible to me, and you never have been. I'm here for you, no matter what. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and hope. It was as if she couldn't believe I was offering her a second chance, a chance to heal from the wounds that had shaped her life. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about me being her mother. It was about offering her the same love and patience that I had always given my own children, even when they hadn't asked for it. Derek stood there, silent, watching the exchange between us. His face was a mixture of relief and sadness, as though he had been waiting for this moment for years. I could see the burden lifting from his shoulders, the fear that had been clouding his every action. I didn't know how to make it right. Emily whispered, her voice shaking, but I want to try. I want to try to fix things, with you, with Derek. I don't want to be afraid anymore. For the first time in a long time, I felt like there was hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, we could start fresh. That Emily and I could build a relationship not just as mother-in-law, but as two women who had both been hurt and were finally willing to let go of the pain that had held us back. I think we can do that, I said softly, one step at a time. The air in the room shifted, lighter now, as if the storm that had been brewing for so long was finally starting to pass. But it wasn't over. The road to healing would be long, and there would be more bumps along the way. But in that moment, I knew that we were finally on the right path. The days following Emily's confession were filled with moments of fragile hope, the kind that you don't dare trust too easily. I knew better than to think that all of our issues would be solved overnight. Healing takes time, and I had learned over the years that when it comes to family, the road is rarely straight or smooth. There were still awkward silences, and sometimes, when Emily and I would talk, I could see her retreat behind those walls she'd carefully built over the years. But there were small victories too, a genuine smile when I visited, an invitation to help cook dinner, an honest conversation about our differences. It was progress, slow and steady. But just when I began to feel like maybe things would work out, just when I started to let my guard down, something happened that made me question everything I thought I knew. That it started one afternoon, about a week after Emily had opened up to me. I was at home, cleaning up some papers and making a list of errands I needed to run. The phone rang, and when I saw it was Derek, my heart sank. He hadn't called much since that dinner, and I had hoped that things were settling in their household. The tension, while still palpable, seemed to be loosening, and I didn't want to disturb it. I picked up the phone. "Mom, I need to talk to you." Derek's voice sounded strained, like he was holding something back. "It's about Emily. Is she okay?" I asked, immediately concerned. "Is something wrong?" There was a long pause, longer than usual, before Derek spoke again. "It's not just about Emily, Mom. It's about ... everything. I've been looking into some things, and I think I need to explain something to you. Something I should have told you before." I could hear his breath quicken, the tension in his voice, and I suddenly had the distinct feeling that something was off. "What do you mean? What's going on?" "It's about her family," Derek said, his voice tight. "About what she's told you and what she hasn't told you. I don't think she's been completely honest with you, and I don't know if she's ready to face it. But I think you should know." I could feel the weight of his words settling in my chest. What was he talking about? I thought we had just made progress. Emily had opened up about her childhood, about her insecurities, but now, it seemed like there was more to the story. A part of me wanted to deny it, to believe that things were finally okay, but the apprehension in Derek's voice told me otherwise. "I don't understand, Derek," I said. trying to keep my voice steady. What is it? What hasn't she told me? He let out a deep breath, then finally spoke, each word coming out with a heaviness that I couldn't ignore. There's something in her past, something that happened before she met me, something she's been hiding for a long time. And it's not just about her parents, it's about something darker. I felt a chill run down my spine. What are you saying? I can't explain it all over the phone, Derek said, but I think it's time we all sat down and talked about it. I don't want to hide it from you anymore. It's important that you know. The words hung in the air like an unspoken truth, and I knew that whatever this was, it was far bigger than I could have imagined. My mind raced, and I tried to gather my thoughts. What was Derek talking about? What could be so terrible that Emily had been keeping it from all of us? I'll come over, I said, my voice now steady with determination. Tell me what I need to know, Derek. We'll figure this out. I could hear the relief in his voice as he responded. Thanks, Mom. I think it'll be good if we all sit down together. I'll let Emily know. When I arrived at their house later that afternoon, it felt different. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, and for the first time in a long time, I could feel the undercurrent of fear. Something was wrong, and I had no idea how deep it went. Derek was in the living room when I walked in, pacing back and forth. He looked up as I entered, his face drawn and tired, like he hadn't slept in days. You're here, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Thanks for coming. I nodded but didn't say anything. I was too focused on what was happening next. Emily was sitting on the couch, her arms crossed tightly, her face unreadable. It was clear she knew what was coming. I could see the tension in her posture. Her lips pressed together as if she was bracing herself for something she wasn't ready to confront. Emily, I said softly, trying to ease the discomfort in the room. What's going on? She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and guilt. I didn't want to tell you this, she said quietly. I didn't want you to know. I sat down across from her, feeling the weight of the conversation press in on me. What is it, Emily? What haven't you told me? She swallowed hard, and I could see the struggle in her eyes. Before Derek and I met, I was involved with someone who was abusive. It wasn't just emotionally, it was physical, too. I never told anyone about it. I didn't want anyone to know what happened to me. I was ashamed. The room seemed to close in around me as I processed her words. My mind spun, and I couldn't make sense of it. Emily, the woman I had tried so hard to connect with, the woman I had believed was distant and cold for no reason, had been hiding this pain all along. I didn't know how to tell anyone, Emily continued, her voice shaking now. It wasn't just that my parents didn't care, it was that I didn't have anyone to turn to. I thought I was strong enough to handle it on my own, but when I met Derek, it was like everything I had tried to bury came rushing back. And I didn't know how to let him love me without feeling like I would be hurt again. I could feel the room shift as she spoke, the air thick with the weight of her confession. I had always known that Emily had a tough past, but I had never imagined it was like this. I had never known the extent of her pain, the depth of the trauma she had suffered. I've been so scared of being hurt again, Emily whispered, her eyes welling with tears. And I pushed you away because I thought if I let anyone in, I'd just be hurt all over again. I didn't know how to accept love without pushing it away. Derek, who had been standing quietly, finally stepped forward, his eyes filled with understanding. It's not your fault, Emily, he said softly. You're not broken. We can work through this. We'll heal together. The truth, the whole truth, had finally come out. Emily's past wasn't just a series of difficult family dynamics. It was a history of abuse, something that had shaped everything about who she was and how she had lived her life. It was no wonder she had pushed me away. No wonder she had felt threatened by the love I offered. She had been conditioned to believe that love always came with a price. I looked at her, my heart heavy with compassion. Emily, you don't have to carry this alone anymore. We're here for you. I'm here for you. And I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that. For the first time since this all began, Emily's face softened. The hardness in her eyes faded, replaced by something more vulnerable, something raw, something real. Thank you, she whispered. I'm so sorry for everything I put you through. I reached out and took her hand, feeling the weight of her pain and the release of years of pent-up hurt. You don't have to apologize, Emily. You didn't ask for any of this. The healing process had just begun, and though there were still so many layers to uncover, I knew we were finally on the path toward understanding. But there was one thing I knew for sure. We couldn't move forward until all the truths had been laid bare. The days following Emily's revelation were filled with a strange mix of emotions. I felt as though a heavy curtain had been drawn back, revealing the scars that lay hidden beneath the surface of her cold exterior. It wasn't just about the abuse she had suffered, it was about the shame, the guilt, and the years she had spent carrying it all alone. I tried to be there for her, to show her that she wasn't alone anymore. But even with Derek's support, I could tell that Emily was struggling to fully accept the truth of what had happened. And that was the hardest part, the realization that no matter how much love or understanding I offered, it was ultimately up to her to heal. Derek, for his part, had been incredibly supportive. He stayed by her side, comforting her when the nightmares came, reassuring her when she pulled away, reminding her that she was safe now. But there was only so much he could do. He couldn't heal the wounds that ran so deep. One afternoon, about a week after Emily had opened up, Derek invited me over for coffee. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when I arrived, I found that he had also invited a few other family members, his sister, Megan, and his aunt Ruth. They were all sitting around the living room, their faces solemn. I could feel the tension in the air as soon as I walked in, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Emily was sitting in the corner of the room, her arms wrapped around her knees. She was quiet, her eyes downcast. Derek gave me a nod, signaling that it was time. "Mom," Derek began, his voice low, "I think it's time for Emily to speak to the rest of the family about what she's been through, about why things have been the way they are. She needs to face the truth not just for her, but for all of us." I glanced at Emily, who was looking anywhere but at me. She had been avoiding direct eye contact for days, and I could tell this moment was not going to be easy for her. But Derek was right. She couldn't keep hiding. She needed to face the people who loved her and let them understand. We all needed to understand. "Emily," I said softly, walking over to her, "it's okay. You don't have to do this alone. We're all here for you." She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with fear, but beneath it, there was something else, something like relief. Maybe she had been waiting for this moment, for someone to give her the space to speak her truth. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can say all of it." "You don't have to say everything," I said gently, "just what you're ready to share." Emily nodded slowly, and after a long moment of silence, she stood up. Her legs wobbled slightly as she walked to the center of the room, her hands trembling at her sides. She took a deep breath before speaking, her voice hoarse. "I've kept this inside for so long," she began, her voice shaking. "And I've been scared that if I told anyone, they would see me as weak or broken. But the truth is, I've been broken for a long time, and it's not something I can hide anymore." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of her admission. I could feel my heart breaking for her, but I knew she needed this. She needed to finally let go of the burden she had carried for so long. "I was in a relationship before Derek," Emily continued, her eyes welling with tears. "It was supposed to be a normal relationship, but it turned toxic. It started with emotional abuse. My ex would tell me I was worthless, that no one else would ever want me. But it didn't stop there. It escalated. There were nights when I felt like I couldn't escape. I felt like I was trapped in my own life. And when I met Derek, I thought he could save me. I thought he could fix everything." Her voice cracked as she spoke, and I saw Derek reach out to her, his hand resting on her shoulder. But she shook her head slightly, as though she needed to say this on her own. "When I met Derek, I thought he was the answer to all of my problems," she went on, her voice softening. "But the truth is, I wasn't ready for love. I wasn't ready to let anyone in, because all I had known was pain. I pushed him away because I thought I didn't deserve him. I thought I didn't deserve any of the good things in my life." I could feel the room shift, the weight of her confession settling on everyone's shoulders. There was a quiet understanding in the room now, understanding that hadn't been there before. Emily was no longer the distant woman who had rejected love. She was no longer the woman who had kept everyone at arm's length. She was a woman who had been broken, and she was finally beginning to put the pieces back together. As she spoke, I noticed the other family members in the room. Derek's sister, Megan, and his aunt Ruth were all silent, their eyes fixed on Emily. They weren't judging her. They weren't looking at her with pity. They were listening, really listening. "I don't know how to make it right," Emily continued, her voice trembling, "but I want to try. I want to be better for Derek, for you, for everyone. But I need time. I need you all to understand that this won't be easy. I have so much to work through, and I can't do it alone." Derek stood up, his eyes filled with unshed tears. He pulled Emily into a tight hug, his voice low as he whispered to her, "You're not alone, Em. We'll do this together." I watched them, my heart swelling with emotion. This wasn't just a moment of healing for Emily, it was a moment of healing for all of us. We had all been carrying so much, and now we were starting to let go of the pain that had kept us trapped. But as the silence settled again, I felt a sense of foreboding. Emily's confession had been cathartic, but it was also just the beginning. The truth had come out, but there were still so many layers to uncover, and I had a feeling that the hardest part was still ahead of us. Just then, Derek's aunt, Ruth, spoke up, her voice firm but kind. "Emily, I think it's time we all take responsibility for the role we've played in this. We've all been too focused on our own pain, on our own misunderstandings, but now we have a chance to rebuild. We have a chance to start over." Her words hit me like a wave. It was true, none of us had been innocent in this situation. We had all contributed to the walls that had been built between us, whether through misunderstanding, fear, or neglect. But now, we had the chance to rebuild. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but we could make it work. She had to face the man who had hurt her. I could see the struggle in her eyes, the fear that still lingered. Despite all the progress, despite the love and understanding she had found in her family, there was one thing she couldn't escape: the memory of the abusive relationship she had been trapped in. The man who had manipulated her, belittled her, and made her feel worthless was still a part of her past. And though she had already shared so much with us, there was still the lingering question: would she be able to truly let go of the past? It was Derek who first brought it up. He was sitting with Emily late one evening, after dinner, when he finally asked the question that had been on both of their minds for so long. "Emily," Derek said gently, his voice soft but filled with concern, "do you think it's time? Do you think you're ready to face him? To tell him that what he did to you isn't your fault?" Emily sat quietly, her gaze fixed on the floor. She hadn't spoken much that evening, her mind clearly elsewhere. I had been sitting nearby, giving them the space they needed. When I heard Derek's question, my heart went out to Emily in that moment. I knew how hard it would be for her. She looked up at Derek, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't know, Derek. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can stand in front of him and tell him everything I've kept inside for all these years. What if he doesn't care? What if he tries to deny it?" "You don't have to do it alone," Derek said, his hand reaching for hers. "We'll be there. You're not going back into that world alone. And this time, you're not the one who's at fault. He's the one who should be ashamed." The words seemed to resonate with Emily. She took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging as the weight of it all finally seemed to come crashing down on her. She had been carrying this for so long, trying to pretend it didn't hurt, trying to forget it had ever happened. But it wasn't that easy. It was never that easy. "I know," Emily whispered, "but I'm scared. I don't want him to have any more control over me. I don't want him to keep making me feel small, like I'm nothing." "You don't have to be afraid anymore," Derek reassured her. "We're here. You don't need to let him control you anymore. You're in control now." For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a spark of determination in Emily's eyes. The fear was still there, but beneath it was something stronger, something I hadn't seen before. She was ready to face her past, ready to take back control of her life. The next day, Emily made the call. She reached out to him. I didn't know what was said during that conversation. She hadn't told me the details, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know. But when she came back into the house that afternoon, she seemed different. Her face was pale, but there was a clarity in her eyes that hadn't been there before. It was as if she had finally come to terms with what she needed to do. "I talked to him," she said, her voice low but steady. "I told him everything. I told him I wasn't going to let him control me anymore, that what he did to me was wrong, that I wasn't the one who should be ashamed. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to." I could see the weight she had lifted from her shoulders, the relief in the way she held herself now. She wasn't the same woman who had come into our lives all those years ago. The woman who had built walls around her heart to protect herself from the pain. She was a woman who had found her voice, who had taken her power back, but there was still more healing to be done. A few days later, Emily and I sat down together in the living room. Derek had gone to work, and Megan and Ruth had stopped by to check on us. It was just the two of us, and I could feel the unspoken bond between us as we sat side by side. "You're doing so well, Emily," I said softly, my hand resting on hers. "You've come so far in such a short time. I'm proud of you." She smiled faintly, but there was still a sadness in her eyes. "I'm not fixed. though I'm still broken in ways I don't know how to fix. I don't know how to make it all go away. Emily, I said, squeezing her hand gently, you don't have to make it go away. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep moving forward, and I'll be here every step of the way. I know, she said, her voice catching slightly. I just need to learn how to forgive myself, and I think I'm finally ready to do that. It was in that moment that I truly understood. Healing wasn't about erasing the past. It wasn't about pretending that the pain never existed. It was about accepting it, owning it, and moving forward. Emily had taken the hardest step. She had confronted her abuser, and she had taken back control of her life. Now, it was time to forgive herself for the things she couldn't change. It wasn't easy, and it wouldn't be quick, but the road ahead was clearer than it had ever been. There would be bumps along the way, days when Emily would doubt herself, days when the past would resurface in the most unexpected ways, but we would face them together, as a family. And that, I knew, was the most important part. As we sat together in the quiet of the room, I realized that our family had changed forever. Emily was no longer the distant woman who pushed us away. She was becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone who had faced the darkness of her past and was now stepping into the light. And I couldn't be prouder of her. We had made it through the storm, and while the road to healing was far from over, we had finally reached the point where we could see the horizon ahead. Author's note: this story was a journey of uncovering deep emotional wounds and learning to heal. While Emily's path was not without its challenges, her journey demonstrates that sometimes healing comes not just from confronting the past, but from accepting and forgiving oneself. It's a reminder that every step towards understanding and reconciliation, no matter how difficult, is a step toward freedom.